Ride accidents I've researched can generally be classed into three groups: accidents with complete available accident reports and a clear understanding of what happened, accidents with no public accident reports, and accidents with complete and public accident reports, but no clear reason for the accident. Today we'll be looking at the latter. These accidents have complete accident reports made by officials, but in each case, no direct cause for the accident could be found. The cause for these accidents remain unknown to this day, and will very likely never know much more. This video can hopefully help reopen discussion on these accidents to possibly discover more. We'll be looking at 3 examples from the last 15 years, all dealing with rider ejections. One from a roller coaster, one from a flat ride, and one from a water slide. Let's get started. On July 11th, 2010, Extreme at Dixieland Theme Park in Baton Rouge, Louisiana was operating normally. A rider was loaded into one of the cars which seated 4 riders. There were 2 riders behind them and they were sitting facing the opposite direction alone. At some point along the ride layout of sharp twists and turns, the rider was ejected from the train, falling to the ground. The rider was killed and the ride was shut down for the investigation. Investigators from the Louisiana State Fire Marshal would call in experts from the ride's manufacturer, Maurer of Germany, as well as independent experts from the National Association of Amusement Ride Safety Officials, or NARSO, a well-respected industry organization in the field of ride safety. They would examine every aspect of the ride. The coaster was created in 2000 for a traveling fair. The coaster was sold to Dixieland in 2007 and operated without incident until 2010. The investigators would conduct extensive research into the ride's mechanical and electrical systems, as well as how the ride was operated that day. They would also examine the design of the restraints in detail. They would end up determining that the ride was in good mechanical and electrical condition at the time of the accident. After interviews with several ride operators, they found that the ejected rider's restraint had been checked multiple times and was properly secured when the train left the station. The investigators also found no fault with the restraint device's design, though interestingly, the ASTM standards for restraint design had been updated since the ride was imported. The ride required Area 4 restraints, which by 2010 required them to be redundant. The single ratchet design of the ride's original lap bars was not redundant, and so following the accident, the park's owners added seatbelts to the ride restraints. They were under no obligation to do this, and were actually in the process of doing this prior to the accident. As a result of the lack of findings regarding the ride's mechanical condition, many suspected that the rider themselves had interfered with the restraints in some way, causing them to be ejected. Due to the design of the seats on this ride where riders sit back to back, the other 2 riders riding with the person who was ejected did not witness the accident. Bystanders who were interviewed did not recall seeing the ejected rider doing anything unusual that could have caused them to be ejected. With that, the investigation was officially closed, having been unable to determine the cause of the accident. The ejected rider's family filed a suit against the park, but following the results of the investigation, the case was either settled out of court or dropped entirely. Today, this accident is largely forgotten, with the official accident report not even being hosted on the Fire Marshal's website anymore. On September 29, 2023, a Wisdom Ride Storm named The Storm at Virginia State Fair was operating normally. At around 3 p.m., a minor was loaded into the ride and their restraints were secured. The ride was started. A few moments later, the rider became free of their restraints and was thrown onto the decking around the ride, possibly being hit by the spinning ride units around them. The ride was stopped and the rider, who had severe injuries, was transported to the hospital. The ride was then shut down by state investigators and the investigation began. The investigation would be headed by the Virginia State Police, Degler Attractions, who were the ride's owner, and the third-party inspection group Worldwide Safety Group. While they're not as well recognized as NARSO, Worldwide Safety Group has experience investigating several other ride accidents, especially accidents that occur on traveling rides. The teams would pore over the ride and the ride's manual to ensure that everything was in compliance. The ride was made by Wisdom Rides, an established American ride manufacturer. This type of ride causes riders to be pressed into their seatbacks under the dynamic conditions and forces of the attraction. Accordingly, the ride featured over-the-shoulder restraints with no other restraining mechanism. As mentioned, the ride's forces push riders backwards into their seats, meaning this ride can use ASTM Area 3 restraints. From wisdom, the ride had a height requirement of 42 inches to ride with an adult and 48 inches to ride alone. Prior to the accident, the ride's owners had raised this to 51 inches to ride. This is not uncommon and usually happens when owners feel that a ride is too intense for younger riders. The investigators from Worldwide Safety Group would complete their review of the ride and report that the ride was in proper mechanical condition and was being operated in accordance with the manufacturer's guidelines at the time of the accident. With no issues being found, the ride was allowed to reopen by the state investigators. The owner, Degler Attractions, would raise the height requirement prior to reopening to 56 inches as an extra precaution. The injured rider would make a recovery. It's still unclear why this ejection occurred. As with any unexplained rider ejection, some have claimed that the rider may have tried to escape the restraints, but there is no current evidence to support this. On July 4th, 2023, the water slide named Twist and Shout at Lake Winnipesaukee Water Park was operating normally. Around 5:05 p.m., two riders were sliding down Flume B on the slide. One rider was a 5-year-old child and the other was an adult. As the rider's raft rounded the final 180-degree turn prior to the ride's runout, the 5-year-old rider was ejected from the slide, falling several feet into the grassy rocks below the slide. The ride was closed and the investigation began. The investigation was headed by the Georgia Office of Insurance, Safety, and Fire Commissioner. They enlisted help from the water park's own safety team as well as the ride's manufacturer, who is a subsidiary of the water park company Vortex Aquatics. The slide had opened in 2014 and had passed state inspections each year. The slide was a family tube slide with a few tight turns ending in a runout pool. The water level on the slide was preset by the manufacturer by a drain at the end of the runout pool. It was not possible to adjust the water level. The manufacturer recommended that each tube hold no more than 2 riders, and the total weight for the tube was not to exceed 250 pounds. The water park weighed riders before the start of the slide, and both riders combined did not exceed this limit. The slide's manufacturer stipulated that no rider could be under 42 inches to ride, and if 2 riders were riding together, one had to be over 48 inches. The ejected rider and the second rider met all of these requirements. After examining the ride and testing it under the conditions present on July 4th, it was found that nothing had gone wrong. Investigators theorized that the ejected rider may not have been holding onto the raft's handles, and that the second rider may not have had their legs around the smaller rider as instructed to do so by the operators at the top of the slide. The injured rider made a full recovery and the slide was reopened. Park officials were instructed by the state to add additional signage about the proper riding position on the slide prior to reopening, which they did install. This has been a selection of just a few ride accidents where we truly don't know what exactly happened. Some have probable causes, but none of these have been confirmed. Many of these suspected causes have been brought up because they're the only reasonable option left for investigators to consider. But behind each one of these, it's possible that there's information they did not uncover, or perhaps situations that have not yet been considered. These accidents go to show that not every accident has a clear cause, and no 2 accidents are the same. Thanks for watching this video. In the event that more information about any of these accidents surfaces, I will make a follow-up with more information. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.